There is a hush inside certain mornings, a stillness so complete that you can hear the world before it begins. Years ago, in the winter hills beyond the city's edge, I stayed at a small temple sewn into the shoulders of pine. Mist braided through the needles. Crows made brief black stitches across the sky. The abbot, an 8th decade elder with hands like folded paper, kept a ritual I came to love. He would slide open a narrow wooden window, let the cold air wash in, and simply sit. No sermon, no instruction, only the sound of a kettle sighing and the far bell of a village waking. One dawn, as the steam rose in ghostly ribbons, he smiled without looking at me and said, "When I was young, I chased clocks. Now I sit and notice that time does not move. Only I do." His words landed not as philosophy, but as weather quiet, inevitable real. The older we become, the more this paradox visits us. Childhood summers felt infinite, broad as a plain of sunlit grass. A single afternoon could contain an entire kingdom of discovery. But somewhere along the line, months began to compress like pages thumbed too quickly. We tell ourselves we've grown busier, that the calendar is to blame, and surely that's part of it. Yet beneath the practical, something more intimate is at work. Time as we live, it is not a wall clock. It is a felt sense. Presence dilates it. Distraction thins it to a thread. Buddhist teaching names this gently. Impermanence says everything flows. Mindfulness says the depth of each moment depends on how completely we meet it. When awareness is bright, a minute can open like a flower. When we go numb, a season shrinks to a receipt we barely read before tossing away. The abbot would not have called this neuroscience, but modern research echoes him. Novelty wakes the mind. Repetition lulls it to sleep. When the day repeats itself, the brain saves energy by skipping the detailed recording. The memory becomes fog, not landscape. I once met a widow named Aiko at a lakeside retreat center in late autumn. She had silver hair pinned with a small tortoiseshell comb and a way of listening that made you feel you were the only sound in the room. I raised 3 sons, she told me. I was always moving laundry lunches night shifts. She looked at the water already wearing its first skin of ice. Sometimes I try to remember the specific Tuesdays, the small Tuesdays of my life. I find so few. She did not say this with bitterness. She said it like someone discovering a map with entire countries left blank. This is not a confession of failure. It is a bell. Our lives are rich with necessary chores, with kindness offered in ordinary shapes. Groceries commutes the careful folding of towels. The point is not to abandon these things, but to awaken inside them. As the elder used to remind me, the tea is not a task. It's a place to live for a while. What makes time feel full? The mind, when undistracted, engages the world freshly. The smell of the orange as you peel it, the exact weight of a mug in your palm, the sound the sparrow makes when it chooses the rusted railing over the flowering branch. Presence turns minutes into rooms with windows. Mindlessness turns hours into narrow hallways. At the temple, mornings carried a gentle choreography, sweeping boiling water, chopping ginger. No one hurried, yet much got done. The difference was attention. I noticed how the elder set down objects. He never placed anything with a thud. Chopsticks met the table like boats touching shore. He taught by example that we are always training the nervous system. The way we close a door is the way we'll close a day. If routine is the soft thief of time, novelty is one path back to spaciousness. But novelty does not require spectacle. You do not need to move across oceans. You can change the angle from which you greet your own street. Walk the opposite direction around the block. Notice the tree you've never named. Sit in a different chair at breakfast so the light falls in an unfamiliar way upon an utterly ordinary bowl. Prepare your tea with your non-dominant hand and watch how clumsy becomes sacred when watched closely. Do not underestimate these humble acts. They are not decorations on spiritual life. They are the hinges upon which a wider door can swing. Another hinge is pausing. 10 seconds many times a day to gather yourself back from the 1,000 errands of the mind. The pause is small, but it is wholly a quiet bow to the present. Feel the soles of your feet in your shoes. Let your shoulders descend from your ears. Name 3 sounds without deciding whether you like them. This practice repeated stitches presence through the fabric of your hours. The thread is simple, the tapestry is not. Reflection too lengthens time, not in duration, but in depth. Each evening, write down 3 moments you want to keep, not achievements moments. The color of late light on the fridge door, the sentence your granddaughter mispronounced that somehow contained more poetry than any book. The relief that passed between you and a stranger when you both stepped aside at the same time and laughed. By writing even a few lines, you signal to your mind, this mattered. The day once a blur returns wearing a face. I remember asking the elder if he feared time slipping away now that his body had grown thin and his breath came shallower on the steeper trails. He laughed softly. People fear the river because it moves, he said. But the river is not what is lost. What is lost is our seeing of it. He took a long inhale as if listening to the pine itself. We don't need to stop the water. We need to learn how to stand in it without being carried off. And how do we do that? He tapped the wooden windowsill with one finger. Stay. Staying does not mean never planning. It does not mean refusing memory or abandoning hope. It means that while remembering and planning, you do not leave this breath. You remain intimate with the life that is actually happening in the chest, in the throat, in the soft bellies of your hands. Many of us, especially after we cross 60, tell ourselves we will rest later, slow down, later, live later. But later is an address the heart cannot locate. The door we can open is always marked now. Perhaps you worry won't paying attention to everything exhaust me. It is the opposite. Attention is not strain, it is permission. Strain is trying to force the moment to be other than it is. Attention is letting it be itself and meeting it with care. When you stop arguing with what is here, you stop leaking energy into the impossible task of changing the past and predicting the future. Energy returns to the simple sacrament of doing one thing only one at a time. A bus driver. I once knew Matteo taught me this in a city whose traffic could fray anyone's kindness. He had a rule: every 10th stop was a sacred stop. He didn't pray aloud or hold up the schedule. He just chose that stop to feel the seat beneath him, to notice the hinge sound of the doors, to see the human being boarding, rather than the category of passenger. He told me the route felt shorter on the days he remembered his sacred stops, not because time sped up, but because it stopped dissolving. You don't need a monastery to learn this. You only need the life you already have. When washing a single spoon, wash only that spoon. When listening to a friend, let the mind loosen its grip on rehearsing the reply. When the sun cuts a bright ribbon across the table, let it be more important than your opinion of the weather. This is not dramatic. It is radical. There's a saying often tossed around that we think we have time. The danger is not in being reminded of mortality. That reminder held gently awakens love. The danger is in misunderstanding what time is. We treat it as something stored in a tank, rationed or squandered. In truth, it is closer to breath, given and taken each cycle, a complete life. When you meet even one cycle fully, you have lived in a way no calendar can measure. So the work, if we can call it that, is exquisite and unspectacular. Invite a sliver of newness into familiar paths. Plant micro-pauses like small flags of awareness across your day. Keep a simple ledger of moments that mattered, and above all, practice staying. The elder's window is everywhere. It is the bus door. It is the sink. It is the face of someone you love when they are not speaking. Slide it open. Let the air in. If the years feel like they are accelerating, it is not a verdict. It is a message. Time is not a predator at your heels. It is a lake, and you have been skimming stones across it. Today, perhaps you set the stones down. You kneel. You touch the water. It touches you back. There comes a quiet hour in the second half of life when the noise begins to lose its power. The ambitions that once roared inside us fade to a softer hum, and what we used to call success starts to feel strangely weightless. The trophies, the promotions, the carefully polished plans. One day you look at them and realize they never held what your heart was really aching for. It's not an instant revelation. It arrives gently like dawn finding its way through half-drawn curtains. You begin to see that the things that matter most were never loud. They were the whispers you ignored when you were too busy chasing everything else. When we are young, life feels like a race. We measure days by how much we can do, how much we can earn, how far we can get. But as the years gather behind us, the finish line dissolves, and the question quietly changes. It's no longer, how much did I do, but how deeply did I live? Somewhere between those questions, something tender happens. The rush softens, the edges blur, and the heart begins to listen. I remember once spending a few weeks at a hospice near Kyoto, a place surrounded by bamboo and silence. The air there always smelled faintly of tea and old wood. One afternoon, I met a nurse named Hana, who had worked there for decades. Her voice carried the calm of someone who had seen both the beginning and the end of life thousands of times. We were folding blankets together when she said almost casually, "No one asks for more meetings when they're dying. They ask for more mornings. They ask for another laugh, another chance to forgive." I still remember the way she said it without sadness, just clarity, like a bell ringing far away. The Buddha called that clarity right view, to see things as they are not as we imagine them to be. He taught that most of our suffering doesn't come from life itself, but from the illusions we wrap around it. The illusion that we'll live forever. The illusion that being busy means being important. The illusion that love must always be grand to be real. When those illusions fall away, what's left is something quieter, but infinitely more precious presence. The ability to be fully awake inside our own days. You see, meaning is not something you have to hunt for. It's not waiting at the end of a career or hiding behind an achievement. Meaning lives in the small, unremarkable moments that pass between us, the ones we're usually too distracted to notice. It's in the way you stir your morning coffee, the way sunlight finds your hands through the kitchen window, the way you listen when someone speaks, not just to their words, but to their silence. Hana once told me that working in hospice taught her to live differently. She said, "When you've watched enough endings, you learn how to begin better." That sentence has followed me for years. To begin better means to live more consciously, more gently, more intentionally. It means asking yourself every morning, If this were my last day, what would I want to give my attention to? Not in a fearful way, but as a reminder of how sacred each ordinary day really is. In Buddhist teaching, there's a reflection called the 5 remembrances. They sound heavy, but they are full of light. We remember that we will age, that we will grow ill, that we will die, that everything and everyone we love will change, and that our actions, our choices, are the only true belongings we carry. These truths aren't meant to frighten us. They are meant to wake us up. When you truly hold them in your heart, gratitude blooms without effort. Every small joy starts to shimmer: the smell of rain, the laughter of someone you love, the gift of one more sunrise. Maybe that's why, as we grow older, we start to value peace over pride, simplicity over speed, kindness over cleverness. Maybe wisdom isn't something we learn, but something we remember after the noise fades. So much of our modern life confuses activity with meaning. We fill our schedules, check every box, answer every message. But have you ever finished a day and felt strangely empty, even though you accomplished everything? That emptiness is your soul, whispering that motion is not the same as purpose. You can run all day and go nowhere at all. True living begins when you stop measuring your worth by your productivity and start measuring it by your presence. You don't have to sell everything or move to a monastery to find peace. You just have to return to what's real, to the people who make you laugh without trying, to the work that feels like love made visible, to the quiet acts of care that no one sees, but that fill the air with meaning. If you want to know what truly matters, imagine yourself many years from now, looking back at this life. What will stand out? It won't be your spotless kitchen or the size of your house. It will be the moments you were brave enough to be kind, the times you said, "I forgive you," the afternoons you sat with someone who just needed company. It will be the tenderness you offered when it would have been easier to turn away. So start small. Each morning before the day begins, sit with your breath and ask, what would truly matter today if this were my last? Write it down if you can. Let that quiet truth guide your choices instead of the clock. You'll find that the day softens, the edges widen, and even the simplest acts, a phone call, a walk, a meal, begin to glow with purpose. The Buddha once said, "Your work is to discover your work, and then with all your heart to give yourself to it." That doesn't mean your job title. It means your dharma, your true way of being in this world. Maybe your work now is to nurture, to listen, to create, to forgive, or simply to rest with grace. Whatever it is, do it with the same reverence you'd offer at a temple. Because every moment of sincere presence is a prayer in motion. And when doubt comes, and it will remember this, you don't have to have everything figured out. You just have to keep returning to what feels alive. The sound of your breath, the warmth of someone's hand, the beauty of still being here with time yet to give and love yet to offer. Because what truly matters was never somewhere else. It's right here inside this heartbeat, waiting to be noticed. There is a quiet tenderness that lives in the spaces between people, an invisible thread that connects one heart to another. When we are young, we often mistake relationships for ownership, for belonging, for the comfort of being understood. But as we grow older, something inside us begins to shift. We start to see that relationships are not possessions. They are sacred grounds where our spirit learns how to love, how to forgive, and how to let go. In my 30s, I thought love was about finding someone who would never leave. In my 40s, I thought it was about finding someone who understood me completely. But now, as the years have softened my certainty, I've come to see that love is really about presence. It's about being there when it matters, about listening with your whole body, about holding space for another soul without needing to fix or change them. A few years ago, at a small meditation center near San Jose, I met an elderly man named Roy. He was in his mid-80s, tall, gentle, his hands trembling just slightly from age. During a group reflection on forgiveness, he spoke up, his voice unsteady but clear. "I haven't spoken to my brother in over 30 years, he said. "We fought over something small. I can't even remember what it was now. I've written him letters, many letters, but I never sent them." The room went silent. You could feel the ache in his words, the weight of all those unsent apologies, all those years spent waiting for courage. The Buddha once said, "Hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love. This is the eternal law." Watching Roy, I finally understood what that meant. Forgiveness isn't about fixing the past. It's about freeing the present. It's about releasing yourself from the prison of your own resentment. When we refuse to forgive, we keep feeding the very pain that hurt us. But when we let go, even just a little, the heart begins to breathe again. So many of us carry invisible cords tied to people we love. Some are warm and steady, others are tangled and heavy, and sometimes we confuse the weight of love with the pain of attachment. But love in its purest form is not a chain, it's a garden. It needs tending, not control. It asks for attention, not possession. When we care for another being, we're not building walls around them. We're nurturing the soil so both hearts can grow. One of the Buddha's simplest and most profound teachings is called right speech. It doesn't mean speaking perfectly. It means speaking with awareness, choosing words that create peace rather than harm. The older I get, the more I realize that most conflicts in life are born not from cruelty, but from carelessness. We speak quickly from pride or fear, and our words become arrows. But when we slow down, breathe, and speak from kindness, our words become bridges. Sometimes the words we most need to say are simple. "I miss you. I forgive you. I understand." And sometimes, even when we can't speak them aloud, we can whisper them silently in our hearts. That too is healing. If there's someone in your life right now who lingers in your thoughts, someone you haven't spoken to, someone you once loved, or maybe someone you hurt, perhaps this is the moment to reach out. Not to reopen an old wound, but to offer light to it. Write a letter, even if you never send it. Sit quietly and wish them peace. The heart knows the way even when the mind resists. Forgiveness is not weakness. It is strength in its purest form. To forgive doesn't mean you condone what happened. It means you choose peace over poison. It means you understand that holding on to anger is like holding a hot coal. It only burns the hand that refuses to let go. In the Metta Sutta, the Buddha taught the practice of loving kindness to wish happiness, safety, and peace, not only to our friends, but also to those who have hurt us. Imagine that the same compassion we offer to the ones we love extended to those we'd rather forget. This is not about being noble. It's about being free. Sometimes the relationship we need to heal isn't with another person, it's with ourselves. We speak harshly to our own reflection, carry guilt for choices we made decades ago, punish ourselves for not being wiser sooner. But every wound in the heart is really a call to return home, to come back to tenderness. You cannot truly offer compassion to others if you refuse to offer it to yourself. There was once a woman I met at a retreat who said something so simple it broke me open. For years, she said, I prayed that others would forgive me. Now I just pray that I can forgive the woman I was. Her voice trembled, but her eyes were steady. I understood then that forgiveness isn't an event, it's a daily practice. Sometimes it's a whisper. Sometimes it's a lifetime. As the years pass, you'll realize that relationships don't need to be perfect to be sacred. Some will remain close, others will fade, and a few will never mend. But even the broken ones have taught you something about patience, about humility, about the cost of pride, and the miracle of grace. Every person you have ever loved or lost has been a teacher in disguise. And in the end, what matters most is not how many people loved you, but how deeply you loved them back. Love that was quiet. Love that asked for nothing. Love that held space without demanding to be understood. So if you remember anything from this reflection, remember this: say what your heart needs to say while there is still time. Don't wait for the perfect moment. It will never come. Reach out while you can. Speak softly. Forgive freely. Because the most painful words you'll ever carry are the ones you never said. And when you sit alone in the stillness of your own life, may you feel the gentle pulse of connection moving through you, the proof that love never really disappears. It only changes form. The sacred ground between hearts never dies. It waits patiently for you to walk upon it again. There is a peculiar stillness that visits many people after retirement. At first, it feels like freedom. The mornings stretch wide. The calendar empties, the weight of deadlines dissolves. You wake without an alarm brew. Your coffee slowly let the sunlight wander across the floor. But then, somewhere between the ease and the silence, another feeling begins to whisper. It asks almost timidly, "Now what?" That question doesn't come from fear. It comes from the soul, softly reminding you that while the body may rest, the spirit still longs to serve, to create, to belong to something greater than itself. The rhythm of work may have faded, but the rhythm of meaning, that heartbeat of purpose, still wants to be heard. I once met a retired architect named Richard during a meditation retreat in Colorado. He had built hospitals, schools, libraries, places designed to outlast him. His life had been structured by blueprints and deadlines, and every hour had a purpose. But when he retired at 67, the silence unsettled him. "I don't know who I am when I'm not building something," he confessed one afternoon, staring out at the snowy mountains. "I thought I'd feel peaceful. Instead, I feel untethered." In that moment, I realized what so many of us discover too late, that our identity often becomes woven around our doing. We are praised for our productivity, not our presence. And when the doing stops, we mistake the quiet for emptiness. But the Buddha taught that true freedom begins precisely there, in the pause between one role ending and another not yet begun. That space, he said, is not a void. It is a field waiting for awareness to bloom. When we no longer have to earn our worth, we can finally learn what it means to be, to sit with our own company, to listen without needing to respond, to discover that purpose is not something we achieve, it's something we embody. In the teachings, there is a concept called sankhara, the mental formations, the patterns that shape our lives. For decades, we build them unconsciously, the pattern of achievement, the habit of striving, the rhythm of self-judgment. When work ends, these patterns still echo inside us, urging us to fill the silence. But if we can resist that impulse, if we can simply breathe and observe, something softer arises, awareness without agenda. I remember sitting with Richard on the temple steps one evening. The sun was melting into the horizon, and a single bell from the shrine hall rang out across the valley. "Maybe you don't need to build anything right now," I said. "Maybe the work is to let what you've built inside yourself finally be seen." He smiled, not as a man who'd been given advice, but as someone who had just remembered something he'd known all along. The Buddha called this kind of awakening right livelihood, not as a job, but as a way of living in harmony with what is true. After retirement, that harmony might mean mentoring a young person, tending a garden, caring for animals, writing letters, or simply being kind to strangers. Purpose at this stage doesn't require structure. It requires sincerity. I once met a woman named Clara, who began reading stories aloud to children at her local library every Thursday. She was 78, with hands that trembled slightly as she turned the pages. "This is my little Dharma," she said with a grin. "Every time I see their eyes light up, I feel like I'm planting tiny seeds of wonder." She didn't do it for recognition. She did it because it made her heart feel useful again. And maybe that's the essence of later life purpose, to offer what your heart still holds. You don't have to create something new. You can simply share what you've already gathered. Your patience, your laughter, your stories, your quiet understanding of how life unfolds and folds again. These are treasures no one else can give. There's a saying in the Majjhima Nikaya: "Just as the ocean has one taste, the taste of salt, so too, the Dharma has one taste, the taste of liberation." Liberation at this point in life doesn't mean escape. It means release from the need to prove, to compete, to rush. It is the freedom to love without expectation, to give without exhaustion, to rest without guilt. If you ever find yourself wondering what your purpose is now, try asking a gentler question. What brings my heart alive? Purpose isn't always about what we produce. It's about what we nurture. Maybe it's a neighbor who needs companionship. Maybe it's a garden that needs tending. Maybe it's simply being the calm presence others turn to when their own world feels too loud. Even the smallest acts can be offerings. Brewing tea for someone who is grieving, feeding birds at dawn, writing a note to a friend who feels forgotten. These are quiet miracles. They may not make headlines, but they make meaning. And yes, there will be days when the silence feels heavy, when the house echoes with too much space, when you wonder if your time has already passed. But remember, a candle's purpose is not only to shine, it is to burn gently, to illuminate whatever room it's placed in. Your light, however soft, still matters. Purpose does not retire. It changes form. In youth, it roars. In age, it hums. The task is no longer to chase after it, but to sit still enough to hear its new melody. So let this season of your life be a practice in quiet contribution. Let your wisdom ripple through the lives you touch, not by instruction, but by example. Let your patience teach what no book can, and your kindness do what no doctrine could. The Buddha once said that a single act of true compassion outweighs 100 rituals of praise. So give the world your compassion. Let it flow through your hands, your words, your stillness. Because the world doesn't need you to be busy anymore. It needs you to be awake. And maybe the purpose you've been searching for isn't something out there to be found. Maybe it's the awareness rising right now in this breath, in this very moment, quietly whispering, "You are already enough." There comes a time in every life when the body begins to speak in a softer, slower language. The joints hum a little when you rise in the morning. The breath moves with more intention. The mirror shows not the same smooth lines it once did, but the story of decades written gently across the skin. At first, this change can feel like betrayal. The body that once obeyed without question now answers in pauses, in sighs, and reminders. But if we listen closely, we might hear something deeper, not a failure, but a call. The body is not giving up on us. It is inviting us to finally care for it with the tenderness it always deserved. In the teachings of the Buddha, mindfulness of the body is called kayanupassana, the first foundation of awareness. Before we can know the nature of mind, we must return to this living vessel that holds us. Every sensation, every ache, every breath is a teacher. The body is the most honest companion we will ever have. It cannot pretend, cannot hide. It tells the truth, even when the mind refuses to listen. I remember meeting a woman named Grace at a retreat center in Northern California. She was 74 and had just recovered from hip surgery. Most of her life she had been active, a dancer, a yoga instructor, the kind of woman who greeted every morning with motion. But when the surgery forced her into stillness, she said she felt like a stranger inside her own skin. I was angry, she admitted one morning as we walked slowly through the garden. I kept asking, "Why can't my body keep up with me anymore?" She laughed softly, shaking her head. It took me months to realize. Maybe my body was asking me to slow down so I could finally keep up with it. That shift from control to compassion is at the heart of the practice. Most of us spend our lives treating our bodies like machines, pushing, fixing, demanding, ignoring. But the Buddha taught that the body is not an obstacle to enlightenment. It is the very path. To breathe consciously, to walk gently, to eat with gratitude, these are not small acts. They are meditations. One afternoon during that retreat, I watched Grace practicing walking meditation. Each step was deliberate, her cane tapping rhythmically against the wooden path. The sun poured through the redwoods, catching her in its soft gold. She turned to me and smiled. "I used to think I needed to get strong again," she said, "but maybe what I really needed was to get kind." The body ages. That is its nature. It is impermanent, fragile, and infinitely wise. Every wrinkle is a testament to experience. Every scar a verse in the poem of being alive. When we stop fighting the truth of the body, we stop fighting life itself. One of the most healing practices you can begin even now is to greet your body as you would a beloved friend. When you wake, place a hand over your heart and simply say, "Thank you. Thank you for carrying me through my joys and my sorrows. Thank you for staying even when I ignored you." This simple act of gratitude transforms the way you move through your day. Instead of seeing the body as something to manage, you begin to see it as something to honor. The Buddha often compared the body to a borrowed house. We live in it for a time, care for it, and then one day we must return it. Knowing this doesn't make the body less precious, it makes it sacred. Every breath, every beat of the heart becomes a moment of borrowed grace. When you eat, eat slowly. Feel the texture, the warmth, the gratitude for the hands that grew and prepared the food. When you walk, notice the miracle of balance that allows you to move through the world upright. When you rest, truly rest. Do not call yourself lazy for listening to your limits. Rest is not indulgence. It is respect. There is also great healing in gentle movement. You don't have to run marathons or climb mountains. The simple act of walking in the morning light, stretching your arms toward the ceiling, or sitting outside to feel the breeze can remind the body it still belongs to the rhythm of life. The point is not performance, it is presence. A Zen teacher once told me, "The body is the bell tower of awakening. Every ache is a ringing. When your back hurts, when fatigue creeps in, When the knees no longer bend as easily, that is not punishment. That is the bell asking for attention, for care, instead of resenting the sound bow to it. There's a meditation I often guide elders through. It's called the body scan. You sit or lie down and move your attention slowly from the crown of your head to the soles of your feet. You notice each part, not to fix or change it, but simply to see it with love. When you reach a place of pain, place your breath there. Inhale compassion. Exhale judgment. You will be surprised how much peace arises when the body feels seen. In one of his teachings, the Buddha said, "To keep the body in good health is a duty. Otherwise, we shall not be able to keep our mind strong and clear." This is not an invitation to obsession. It's an invitation to balance, to care for the body, not out of vanity, but out of reverence. A clear mind cannot dwell in a neglected home. So if your body feels slower now, gentler, more fragile, let it. There is no shame in being human. Every living thing slows as it matures. The oak tree does not apologize for its creaks. It simply stands more rooted, more knowing. You too are learning how to live in this slower rhythm, the rhythm of patience, of humility, of grace. Your body is not broken. It is wise. It has carried you across landscapes of laughter and grief, across decades of doing and being. It has healed wounds you thought would never close. It has loved, labored, endured, and survived. That is not failure. That is devotion. So let this be your new practice, to treat your body not as an old tool to be maintained, but as a sacred teacher to be listened to. When it asks for rest, give it rest. When it hungers, feed it with kindness. When it trembles, hold it gently. Because one day, when we finally learn to love this body, as it is not, as it once was not, as we wish it to be, we will realize that enlightenment was never somewhere far away. It was pulsing here all along beneath the skin, in the rhythm of our fragile, miraculous breath. There's a quiet myth we often inherit, the idea that learning belongs to the young, that wisdom arrives once and then stays like a diploma framed on the wall. But truth, as life patiently teaches us, is far less tidy. Wisdom is not a certificate. It is a living river. It deepens as it flows, carving new channels through the terrain of our years. And if we keep the heart open, it never stops moving. I once attended a Dharma talk in a small sangha in Santa Fe. The teacher was a 92-year-old lay monk named Samuel. He walked slowly, leaning on a polished wooden cane, his robe the color of autumn earth. When everyone had settled, he didn't begin with a sermon. Instead, he asked softly, "What are you learning these days?" The room went still. Some smiled politely, assuming it was a rhetorical question, but he asked again, this time with a gentleness that made the air itself lean closer. "Truly, what are you still learning?" No one spoke, and then he chuckled. "I'm learning how to be gentle with my fear of forgetting names." The room erupted in laughter, the kind that breaks tension, the kind that feels like exhaling after years of holding your breath. But beneath that laughter was something sacred. He had just taught the whole room what humility looks like when it's full grown. In Buddhism, there is a word prajna, often translated as wisdom, but it doesn't mean mere knowledge. It means understanding born from direct experience, from the way life has shaped and softened us. Books can point to it, teachers can describe it, but only time, heartbreak, and attention can ripen it fully. As we age, our task is not to collect more information. It is to refine understanding, to let the lessons of our life settle, to listen to what remains true after everything else has fallen away. Wisdom isn't about knowing all the answers. It's about learning to live gracefully with the questions. One of the most beautiful truths of later life is that we finally have the space to learn for love, not for achievement. The need to impress or prove begins to dissolve, leaving behind a quieter, truer curiosity. You begin to learn because it feels like breathing. You read not to conquer knowledge, but to listen for something sacred between the lines. I met a woman named Linda who began teaching meditation at her senior center when she was 76. She had no certificates, no formal title. She simply gathered a few friends every Tuesday afternoon and led them in 15 minutes of mindful breathing. "I'm not a teacher," she told me once, laughing. "I just tell them what helped me breathe again." That, I think, is the purest form of wisdom, the kind you share not from a pedestal, but from the ground eye to eye, soul to soul. The Buddha himself said, "When one lights a lamp for another, it also brightens one's own path." Each time we share what we've learned, even a single insight, even a single breath, we keep that lamp alive. The older I grow, the more I see that teaching is not a position. It's a presence. You don't need to stand at a podium to be a teacher. Every conversation, every act of listening, every moment of patience becomes a quiet lesson for someone else. And here's the gentle irony: the more we share, the more we learn. Wisdom is not a possession to be stored. It is a flame that burns brighter when passed from hand to hand. Sometimes wisdom comes not through study, but through surrender. A friend once told me, "Every decade life humbles me in a new way." That humility, the willingness to be wrong, to be reshaped, to say "I don't know" with peace in your voice, is the mark of true growth. The wise do not stand above others. They kneel beside them. Maybe you've noticed how, as the years pass, your definition of what's important changes. When you were young, learning meant expanding outward, chasing new skills, new ideas, new horizons. Now, learning moves inward. It becomes about remembering what's already within you. You discover that the deepest truths are not new. They're ancient, waiting patiently beneath the noise of your ambitions. Learning in later life isn't about mastering something external. It's about refining the art of being human. You learn how to sit with uncertainty without panic, how to grieve without hardening, how to love without needing to own. You learn how to let go, not out of defeat, but out of understanding that nothing real can ever be lost. There's a quiet joy in realizing that wisdom doesn't make you invincible. It makes you softer. It opens the heart instead of fortifying it. It teaches you that to know deeply is to care deeply. If you ever doubt the value of your years, remember this: your experiences, the mistakes, the triumphs, the ordinary days are your sutras. They are your sacred texts. When you tell your stories, when you share what life has taught you, you're not just reminiscing. You're passing along Dharma, the truth made flesh. And even if you don't speak them aloud, your presence still teaches. The calm in your eyes teaches. The way you listen without rushing teaches. The way you forgive, the way you sit quietly with a cup of tea and watch the world move. These teach more than any sermon ever could. So keep learning, not because you are incomplete, but because life keeps whispering new meanings into old lessons. And keep teaching, not because you are superior, but because your footprints can light the way for those still wandering. As the evening of life deepens, the soul doesn't ask, "What did I accomplish?" It asks, "What did I understand?" And the answer is never found in how much we knew, but in how gently we learned. There is a strange expectation that comes with age that by now we should have mastered our emotions. That sadness should no longer surprise us, that anger should have burned itself out, that grief should have found a quiet corner and fallen asleep. But emotions are not students who graduate and leave us. They are companions, some tender, some wild, all asking to be understood. Even the Buddha, serene as he was, did not teach a path free of emotion. He wept when his disciples died. He felt compassion so deep, it broke open his heart. The goal was never to suppress feeling. It was to see feeling clearly, without being consumed by it. I remember an elderly man named Arthur I met during a silent retreat. He was dignified and soft-spoken, with hands that trembled only when he spoke of his wife. On the third day, he didn't show up to the afternoon meditation. I found him later by the edge of the garden, sitting beneath a maple tree, tears glistening on his cheeks. When I sat beside him, he whispered, "I remembered something cruel I said to her 40 years ago. I thought I'd forgotten." We sat there a long while without speaking. The air was cool, the birds gentle. Finally he said, "It just hurts that I can't apologize anymore." That's the quiet truth of aging. The heart remembers what time cannot erase. Regret doesn't always ask to be fixed. Sometimes it just asks to be felt. The Buddha taught that emotions are like clouds. They come, they go, they never stay. They are not who we are. They are experiences passing through. Anger, sorrow, fear. They rise, reach their peak, and fade. Neuroscientists now confirm what ancient monks knew. The physical life of an emotion lasts about 90 seconds, unless we feed it with stories. When we replay it, justify it, resist it, we keep it alive. But if we breathe, stay still, and allow it to exist without judgment, it softens on its own. There is a practice known as rain, taught by the Buddhist teacher Tara Brach, rooted in ancient mindfulness. Recognize what is happening. Allow it to be there. Investigate with curiosity. Nurture with kindness. When sorrow visits, begin gently. This is sadness. You're not weak for feeling it. You're awake for noticing it. It's okay, my love. You can be here. You breathe. You listen. You ask, "What do you need from me right now?" And often the emotion answers, not in words, but in a loosening somewhere deep inside. This is how we learn to hold our storms, instead of being swept away by them. There's a story I once heard about a Zen monk who was asked by a student master, "What do you do when anger arises?" The old man smiled and said, "I let it rise." The student frowned. "And when it passes, I let it pass." The monk replied, "Then what do you do?" The monk chuckled, "I bow to it for reminding me that I am still alive." To feel deeply is not a flaw. It's a sign that the heart has not hardened. I once spoke with a woman in her 60s who said, "I spent my whole life trying not to feel too much. Now I let myself feel everything, and somehow I've never been more at peace." There was a light in her face, not because she was free of pain, but because she was no longer running from it. When we stop resisting emotions, they transform. Grief becomes gratitude for what we loved. Fear becomes awareness of what we value. Anger becomes clarity about our boundaries. Even loneliness can become an invitation to meet ourselves again, honestly, without distraction. One of the Buddha's most comforting teachings says, "As a solid rock is not shaken by the wind, so the wise are not moved by praise or blame." But notice the rock still feels the wind, still knows its presence, still allows the breeze to pass. Peace doesn't mean being untouched. It means being unmoved at the core, even as the heart trembles on the surface. Many people reach a point where they believe that peace is the absence of emotion. But peace is not an empty room. peace is the spaciousness in which every emotion can walk in, sit down, and rest. Sometimes when the heart feels too heavy, I tell those I teach, do not try to fix it. Try to hold it. Imagine your sorrow as a child who is crying. You would not scold the child for its tears. You would gather it close, stroke its back, whisper, "It's okay. I'm here." This is the essence of self-compassion, not to silence the pain, but to stay beside it until it feels safe enough to release itself. You see, emotions are not problems. They are messengers. Anger says something you value has been crossed. Sadness says something you love has changed. Fear says you are stepping beyond what you know. And joy. Joy is the quiet reminder that your heart still works, still beats, still reaches. We often fear emotion because it reminds us of how vulnerable we are. But that very vulnerability is the door to wisdom. When the heart breaks, it breaks open. Through the cracks, light enters. So the next time emotion rises, don't turn away. Bow to it. Let it teach you what it came to teach. Cry if you must. Whisper forgiveness to yourself. Let your tears water the garden of your becoming, because peace is not found in avoiding the storm. Peace is found in learning to sit quietly in the rain, knowing that in time the clouds will part, the air will clear, and somewhere within the silence that follows, a softer kind of joy will bloom. And maybe the heart washed clean by all it has endured will whisper, "Thank you. I am still here." Somewhere along the long road of life, many of us are taught quietly, persistently, that success means accumulation, more money, more security, more things. We spend decades building, saving, achieving, stacking moments and possessions like bricks, believing one day they'll make us safe. And yet, when the body slows, when the house is quiet and the calendar no longer full, something unsettling begins to whisper. Was all of this really wealth? I once shared tea with a man named Charles. He had been a successful attorney, sharp, disciplined, respected. His office had been his kingdom, his calendar, his altar. He retired at 70, and for the first few months, he enjoyed the stillness he'd long postponed. But eventually, he said, the silence grew too loud. His voice trembled when he added, "I thought I was building a life, but I was building a fortress." The Buddha never condemned wealth. He taught kings, merchants, and farmers alike accepting their offerings with gratitude. But he warned gently about upadana clinging, not to things themselves, but to the illusion that things could protect us from change. The wise, he said, understand that riches are impermanent, and so they give freely, living with hearts unbound. Modern life tells us to chase financial freedom. But what if true freedom is freedom from the chase itself? When I asked Charles what he missed most about his working years, he didn't say the money. He said the conversations, the laughter, the small sense that I mattered. That's what time had revealed to him, that wealth without connection is poverty in disguise. We are born rich, not in possessions, but in possibilities. A child's wealth is measured in wonder. Every leaf is a miracle. Every sunrise is enough. But as the years pile up, we trade that currency for paper and plastic for calendars and status. And in the end, the soul grows thinner, even as the wallet thickens. There is a phrase in Buddhist psychology called time affluence. It means the felt sense of having enough time for what truly matters. Studies now show that those who feel time rich are often happier, healthier, and more peaceful than those with greater material wealth. Why? Because time is the one treasure we can never earn back once it's spent. and yet how easily we squander it on worry, comparison, and endless striving. A monk I once met in Chiang Mai said, "Every object you buy also buys a portion of your attention. Be careful what you purchase with your peace." His words stayed with me. I began to see how every possession carries a subtle cost: maintenance, protection, fear of loss. The more we own, the more we owe our energy to what we own. True wealth, the Buddha taught, is measured not by how much we possess, but by how little we need. It is the contentment that arises when you can sit quietly, surrounded by simplicity, and still feel complete. I met an elderly woman once who embodied this. Every month she set aside a small sum, not for herself, but to bring joy to others. Some months she'd buy flowers for her neighbor. Other months she'd surprise her granddaughter with a handwritten letter tucked with a few coins for ice cream. She called it her happiness fund. When I asked why she did it, she smiled and said, "It reminds me I have enough to share." That, I think, is the secret of spiritual wealth: generosity. Not grand gestures, but simple acts that free the heart from its own grip. When you give not because you must, but because you can, you shift from ownership to offering. The energy that was once trapped in anxiety begins to move again. The Buddha once compared generosity to a river. When the water flows, it stays fresh. When it stagnates, it breeds decay. So too with our hearts. When we hold too tightly our money, our time, our affection, they turn heavy. But when we release them, we feel light again. Ask yourself gently, what is enough for me? Enough comfort, enough security, enough food, enough rest. Once you find that point, protect it like a sacred line. Because everything beyond enough is often just noise that drowns out peace. You may not be able to buy more years, but you can fill the years you have with something money can't purchase: presence, kindness, connection. And if you're wondering how to begin, start with small offerings: a phone call to someone lonely, a meal shared, slowly a moment spent noticing the world without wanting anything from it. These are acts of abundance. One afternoon during a Dharma talk, a teacher asked, "What is the richest person in the world?" After a pause, he answered himself, "The one who wakes each morning without craving." That line felt like a bell, because what if the real measure of wealth is not how much we gather, but how freely we give, how easily we smile, how content we feel sitting in a room with nothing but breath and gratitude. When I left Charles that day, he walked me to the door. His garden, once manicured like a courtroom, was now wild with clover and sunlight. "You know," he said, glancing toward the sky, "I think I'm finally learning how to spend what I have left." And maybe that's the quiet truth that takes a lifetime to see. The greatest investment is not in what we keep, but in what we let go of. Because the richest heart is the one that no longer fears loss. The freest soul is the one that trusts completely that enough is already here. There is a particular kind of light that only appears late in the day, soft, golden, forgiving. It touches everything without judgment: the old paint peeling from the wall, the cracks in the windowsill, the worn texture of a familiar hand. I've always thought that this is how creativity feels in the later chapters of life. Not a blazing fire demanding to be seen, but a quiet warmth spreading across everything we touch. Many people believe that creativity belongs to the young, that art is a race, that music is for the gifted, that writing is for the brave. But the truth is far simpler and far kinder. Creativity belongs to anyone who still has breath in their body and wonder in their heart. It is not about mastery. It is about attention, the simple act of seeing life clearly and loving what you see enough to give it form. I once met a retired postal worker named Martha. She was 71, recently widowed, and lived alone in a small house with creaking floors and a garden that smelled of rain. One morning, while walking past the grocery store dumpster, she noticed a pile of cardboard. She took some home, cut them into small squares, and began painting on them using leftover house paint. At first, it was just to pass time, but soon her garage walls were covered in color: sunsets, birds, quiet fields, faces that seemed to rise out of memory itself. When I asked her why she painted, she said, "Because when I paint, the silence feels like company." That sentence stayed with me for years. Creativity, I realized, is not only about expression, it's about communion. When we create, we sit down with life itself and say, "I see you." It's a conversation between the soul and the world, between what's fleeting and what's eternal. In Buddhist philosophy, creativity and mindfulness are twins. The practice of awareness, noticing the texture of breath, the curve of a leaf, the sound of distant rain, is itself an act of creation. Every moment we truly see becomes art. Every silence we inhabit becomes music. The Zen poet Basho once wrote, "Sitting quietly doing nothing, spring comes and the grass grows by itself." That's what creativity after 60 feels like. There's no rush, no ambition. It's the quiet unfolding of something that was always there waiting. Maybe you used to sing before life became too noisy. Maybe you loved to write, but never had the courage to share. Maybe your hands once knew how to make things: quilts, gardens, melodies, but you stopped because the world convinced you it didn't matter. Let me tell you gently, it still matters. Your voice still matters. Your hands still remember. And no, it's not too late. In fact, now is the perfect time, because for the first time you're creating, not to prove anything, but to connect. When you make something now, a drawing, a poem, a loaf of bread, you're not chasing applause. You're weaving presence into form. You're saying, "I am here. I am still alive." And that in itself is sacred. A Buddhist monk once told me that art is a form of meditation in motion. He said, "When you write a poem, you breathe through words. When you paint, you breathe through color. When you cook, you breathe through flavor. And in that breathing, you disappear. To create is to dissolve into what you love. There is no age limit on that." Some of the most beautiful art I've ever seen wasn't perfect, it was honest. A slightly uneven clay bowl made by trembling hands. A song sung off-key, but from the heart. A letter written in shaky handwriting that said everything the voice could not. Perfection is irrelevant. Presence is everything. There's a Japanese philosophy called wabi-sabi, which celebrates the beauty of imperfection. The crack in the vase, the frayed edge of cloth, the faded paint on the doorframe, the old, the worn, the mended. They have a beauty that newness can't hold. You too carry that kind of beauty now. So don't ask whether it's too late to create. Ask only what your soul longs to say before it's silent. Write it, paint it, sing it, plant it, whisper it to the sky if you must. Creation doesn't need an audience. The act itself is enough. And even if the result is never seen, it changes you. It reminds you that the river of life still flows through your veins, that you are not done giving. That wonder still lives inside you, waiting to take shape. One woman I know in her 80s began collecting pebbles from her morning walks. Each one she painted with a small word: hope, peace, stillness, enough. She left them on park benches, under trees, beside doorsteps. She never signed them. She said, "They're not mine. I just send them where they need to go." That is art. That is Dharma. That is love disguised as color and stone. So if you find yourself sitting alone some evening, the house quiet, the clock ticking, maybe pick up a pen, or hum softly to yourself, or light a candle and arrange a few flowers in a cup. It doesn't have to be perfect. It only has to be real, because the act of creating is an act of remembering that you are still part of this great unfolding. That beauty still needs your eyes to witness it, your hands to shape it, your breath to bring it to life. The world doesn't need your masterpieces. It needs your sincerity, your curiosity, your willingness to see again. And perhaps when the last light of day touches your face, it will whisper what all true artists eventually learn. You were never creating things. You were creating yourself. There comes a moment in life, sometimes quiet, sometimes undeniable, when you realize that energy, not time, is your truest currency. You can no longer spend it carelessly. You feel it when you wake in the morning, a deeper awareness of what drains you and what restores you. You can no longer afford to live on automatic. Every conversation, every thought, every obligation either nourishes your spirit or quietly steals from it. When we are young, we believe energy is endless. We burn it in every direction, in ambition, in relationships, in worry. But as the years unfold, the body begins to whisper a truth the mind once ignored. You are not a machine. You are a flame, and the flame needs tending. I once met a man named Elias during a meditation retreat. He was 73, recently widowed and quietly struggling. He told me, "I have time now more than ever before, but I don't seem to have the will to do anything with it. I wake up already tired." As we talked, I realized he wasn't describing physical exhaustion. It was something gentler, deeper, the fatigue that comes from years of giving without replenishing, of doing without being. The Buddha called this imbalance wrong effort. Not wrong as in bad, but effort without mindfulness, without alignment. Right. Effort, one of the steps on the Eightfold Path, is about directing your energy wisely toward that which heals, not harms, awakens, not numbs. It's not about doing more. It's about doing what matters with a clear, compassionate heart. Our culture worships busyness. We confuse exhaustion with accomplishment. Even in retirement, many carry that habit into old age, filling days with distractions, errands, endless obligations, as if slowing down were a crime. But the Dharma invites a radical truth. Rest is sacred. Stillness is not a failure of productivity. It is the root of clarity. Nature teaches this effortlessly. Fields must lie fallow before they bloom again. Trees shed leaves not in defeat, but in preparation for renewal. Why then do we resist our own seasons of rest? When Elias began to meditate each morning, not as a discipline, but as an act of kindness, something changed. "I stopped trying to make my energy bigger," he said. "I started making my life smaller." He simplified his commitments, learned to say no gently, and began each day by asking a single question. Does this give me life, or does it take it away? That question is a compass. You can ask it before saying yes to a favor, before turning on the news, before reaching for your phone. Feel the answer in your body, a soft expansion or a tightening. The body always knows. Monks understand this well. In monasteries, the schedule isn't filled with doing. It's balanced between effort and ease. There are hours for meditation, hours for work, and hours for simply walking, drinking tea, or sitting beneath a tree. The robe itself is a symbol of simplicity. Fewer choices, fewer distractions, more space for what matters. They conserve energy, not to withdraw from life, but to deepen their participation in it. You can do the same even in an ordinary home. Simplify what you can. Wear what feels comfortable. Eat what nourishes. Reduce the decisions that don't serve your heart. It's not about minimalism for show. It's about clarity for peace. And when you rest, truly rest, do it without apology. Sit by the window and watch the light shift across the room. Take a slow walk, not to exercise, but to notice. Breathe as though each breath were a small gift returning you to yourself. Remember, you do not owe the world your constant doing. You owe it your awake presence. The Buddha once said, "Just as a candle cannot burn without fire, people cannot live without a spiritual life." That fire he spoke of isn't about intensity, it's about aliveness. When your energy is directed with mindfulness, even small actions glow with sacredness. Washing dishes becomes meditation. Making tea becomes ceremony. Listening to another person becomes an offering. The key is rhythm. Energy flows in cycles: inhale, exhale, sunrise, sunset, effort, rest. The more we fight those cycles, the more we suffer. When you feel tired, it's not laziness, it's life calling you back into balance. When you feel restless, it's not failure, it's energy asking to move. Begin small. Each morning before you rise, place a hand on your heart and ask, "How can I spend my energy in kindness today?" Then listen not to the noise of guilt or duty, but to the soft guidance of intuition. If you sense that something drains you, step away. You are not here to carry everyone's burden. If something lights you up, a conversation, a melody, the scent of rain, give it your full attention. That is spiritual economy, giving energy to what expands your awareness. Elias once told me, months after his retreat, I started taking naps again. I used to feel guilty, but now I call them my mini retirements from worry. He laughed, and there was light in his eyes I hadn't seen before. That's the transformation the Buddha meant by liberation, not escape from the world, but release from the needless tension we build inside it. So honor your energy the way you would tend a sacred flame. Feed it with love. Shield it from what dims it. Let it flicker and dance and rest when it needs to. You don't need to burn brighter. You just need to burn true. And maybe when your day ends, you'll look back, not with exhaustion, but with peace, knowing your energy was spent, like a prayer, not wasted, not scattered, but offered moment by moment to what truly matters. There are two kinds of loneliness in this life. The first is loud. It echoes in empty rooms, hums through unanswered calls, sits beside you in the quiet of a long evening. But the second kind is quieter, more subtle. It's the loneliness that appears even when you're surrounded by people, a feeling that no one really sees you anymore, not the real you beneath the small talk and polite smiles. As the years go on, this second kind of loneliness becomes more common and perhaps more painful. But what if I told you that belonging doesn't come from being surrounded by many people, but from being deeply connected to a few, or even to one, or even to yourself? I learned this truth years ago at a small Buddhist temple in Vermont, tucked between tall pine trees and a river that whispered all night long. Every Sunday, a handful of elders gathered there, no chanting, no robes, just a circle of folding chairs and cups of steaming tea. They'd meditate together, talk quietly about their weeks, and sometimes sit in silence for long minutes without anyone feeling the need to fill it. One afternoon, a woman named Ruth, 76, soft-spoken with eyes bright as morning dew, said something that I've never forgotten. "I don't come here for the teachings," she smiled. "I come because someone remembers my name." And just like that, The whole room fell still, because in that one sentence, Ruth had said, what most of us are too proud to admit: we don't want grand recognition, we just want to be remembered. In Buddhism, Sangha, the community, is one of the three jewels, alongside the Buddha and the Dharma. The Sangha isn't simply a group, it's the living field of connection that supports awakening. Even the Buddha, after reaching enlightenment beneath the Bodhi tree, didn't remain in solitude. He walked, he taught, he gathered a community, because even wisdom without compassion and companionship begins to fade like an unlit candle. In the modern world, especially in the West, we are taught to prize independence. Don't burden others, we're told. Be self-sufficient. And so we grow older quietly, trying not to ask for help, convincing ourselves that isolation is dignity. But the Dharma tells a different story, that connection is not weakness, it is part of our awakening. I met a woman named Gloria who understood this deeply. After retiring as a nurse, she began hosting something she called Sunday tea circles. She'd place a few chairs in her backyard, brew a pot of tea, and invite neighbors, anyone who wanted to come. There was no agenda, no discussion topic. Sometimes they shared stories. Sometimes they just sat together in the soft warmth of the afternoon sun. It's not a support group, she laughed once. But somehow, we all leave feeling supported. What Gloria created wasn't complicated, but it was holy. Because belonging doesn't always look like deep conversation or shared beliefs. Sometimes it's the quiet knowing that you don't have to hide, that your silence is safe, that someone will notice if you don't show up. True community doesn't ask you to be perfect. It asks you to be present. If you feel alone in this season of your life, start small. Call someone you miss. Send a letter. Invite a neighbor for tea, even if you barely know them. Not to fix loneliness, but to open a door. Connection begins with a single act of willingness. And if no one comes, if the invitation falls into silence, don't despair. Sit anyway. Make tea anyway. Someone somewhere will feel the warmth of that intention. Because connection isn't only between people, it's also between hearts. In Buddhist practice, there's a meditation called Metta Bhavana, the cultivation of loving kindness. You begin by sending compassion to yourself, then to those you love, then to those you've never met, and finally, to those who have hurt you. It is a reminder that every being, no matter how far, is part of one great web of belonging. When you practice this, even sitting alone, you begin to feel it, that the air itself hums with connection. Loneliness, in its truest sense, is not a punishment. It's an invitation to reconnect, to reach, to soften, to remember that you were never meant to live in isolation. Every soul needs reflection. Every heart needs another heart to rest against, even if just for a moment. And community doesn't have to be large to be sacred. It can be the barista who remembers your order, the child next door who waves when you water your plants, the friend you text once a week with a simple, "I'm thinking of you." These small gestures are threads, fragile but real, weaving a net that keeps us from falling too far inward. The Buddha once told his attendant, Ananda, admirable friendship, admirable companionship, admirable camaraderie is actually the whole of the holy life, not a part of it the whole. Because without connection, even the most disciplined practice risks becoming dry. Compassion must be lived, not just contemplated. So if you've built walls around yourself, walls of pride, of pain, of habit, consider that maybe it's time to let a little light in. You don't need to open all the windows, just one. And if you already have a circle, however small, tend to it with love. Listen deeply. Remember birthdays. Ask real questions. Offer patience instead of advice. Because one sincere friend is worth more than 100 distant admirers. When we gather in truth, not to impress, but to be real, something miraculous happens. The boundaries between hearts begin to blur. We realize that everyone is carrying something. That kindness is not charity, it's recognition. And in that recognition, loneliness begins to loosen its grip. Maybe that's what Ruth meant that day, when she said she came because someone remembered her name. To be remembered is to exist again in another's heart. And that truly is what belonging means. So today, remember someone. Speak their name with love. Let them know they still matter. Because in reminding another of their place in this great circle of life, you'll find your own again. And when you next sit quietly, tea warming your hands, sunlight on your face, may you feel it, that invisible thread, stretching gently from your heart to all hearts, unbroken, eternal, alive. There's a special kind of clarity that doesn't arrive in youth. It takes time, decades of living, failing, forgiving, and beginning again before the fog inside the mind begins to lift. It's not the sharp clarity of intellect, nor the quick certainty of ambition. It's something slower, deeper, and infinitely kinder. It's the clarity that comes when you stop needing to be right and start wanting to be free. I once met a retired librarian named Janice who described this beautifully. When I was younger, she said I reacted to everything. If someone was rude, I snapped back. If a plan failed, I took it personally. My emotions were always driving the car. She smiled and added softly, "Now I just let them ride in the back seat." That, in essence, is wisdom. The Buddha called it vipassana, clear seeing. It's the ability to look at life without the fog of judgment, without the pull of fear or desire. To see things as they really are, not as our minds insist they should be. It doesn't mean becoming indifferent or detached. It means becoming intimate with truth. The older we get, the more important this becomes. Because the challenges of later life health issues, loss, loneliness, change, cannot always be fixed, but they can be seen clearly. And in that clarity, there is freedom. When you see clearly, you realize that most suffering isn't caused by what happens, but by how we interpret what happens. The world gives us moments, neutral, raw, unfolding, and our minds paint over them with stories. This shouldn't be happening. I can't handle this. It's too late. These stories are what trap us. The Buddha taught that delusion. Moha is one of the three poisons of the mind, along with greed and hatred. Delusion doesn't mean ignorance in the usual sense. It means not seeing things clearly. It's like wearing foggy glasses and assuming the world itself is blurred. Vipassana clears the lens. But how do we cultivate it? It begins, as all practice does, with slowing down. When something stirs emotion in you, anger, disappointment, fear, don't react. Pause. Breathe. Notice what's happening inside. What do you feel in your body? What story is your mind telling you? Then ask gently, what is true here right now beyond the story? That small pause is liberation in motion. It's the moment when awareness steps in and ego steps back. Janice told me she practices this every day. I used to think wisdom meant having all the answers, she said. Now I know it means asking better questions. One of those questions is, will this matter in a year? Another is, what choice brings peace, not just relief? Relief is temporary. Peace endures. In Buddhist psychology, this discernment is called prajna, the wisdom of understanding. It's not learned from books or teachers. It grows from experience, from quiet reflection, from sitting still with what is uncomfortable until it reveals its lesson. For example, when a loved one disappoints you, the mind might rush to defend or accuse. But clear seeing asks, is this hurt about them, or about an old wound in me being touched? Often it's both, and knowing that softens everything. The world today moves faster than ever. Headlines flashing opinions, shouting decisions demanded. But wisdom refuses to hurry. It listens, it breathes, it knows that truth often whispers. There's a Zen saying, when the mud settles, the water becomes clear. We can't see through muddy water by stirring it faster. We must wait. Let it rest. Let stillness reveal what motion hides. One of my teachers once said, clarity doesn't come from thinking harder. It comes from thinking less and noticing more. Try this when faced with a decision large or small. Don't rush. Sit quietly. Breathe. Ask yourself, what choice brings me closer to peace? What choice feels clean in my heart? The body knows. It tightens around lies and relaxes in truth. Trust that, and know this clarity doesn't mean certainty. You can see clearly and still not know exactly what to do. That's all right. True wisdom doesn't need all the answers, it only needs honesty. Sometimes the wisest thing you can say is, I don't know yet. That space, the not knowing, is where life can speak. When you stop reacting, you start responding. And response is born of freedom, not fear. The Buddha once said, with our thoughts, we make the world. When your thoughts are clouded by judgment, your world feels heavy. When your mind is clear, even ordinary moments become luminous. So each day, practice cleaning the mirror of your awareness. Sit in silence even for 5 minutes. Watch your breath. Watch your thoughts come and go like clouds. Don't chase them. Don't fight them. Just see, little by little the storms quiet. The water clears. And in that stillness, what you see both in the world and within yourself is not perfection, but truth. And truth once seen changes everything. It changes how you speak, how you forgive, how you spend your time. It softens your judgments and sharpens your compassion. You begin to see that no one is really your enemy, only another being lost in their own fog. You see that pain doesn't mean failure. It means life asking you to pay attention. You see that every moment, no matter how small, contains the possibility of awakening. And when that seeing becomes steady, not perfect, just honest, you realize something miraculous. Peace was never somewhere else. It was always right here, waiting behind the noise. All it asked was that you open your eyes and look gently. There comes a tender point in life, usually after the noise has softened. The striving has slowed, and the titles we once clung to begin to fade, when a simple yet powerful question rises from the stillness. How do I want to live now? It doesn't come as a demand. It comes as an invitation. A quiet voice asking, not about achievement, not about legacy, but about peace. When we are young, life feels like a race. We run toward things, careers, relationships, goals, and for a time that running feels right. But eventually, the pace becomes unsustainable. One day the body slows, and the spirit whispers, perhaps it's time to stop chasing and start listening. The Buddha called this bhavana, the cultivation of the mind. He taught that peace doesn't come by accident. It's something we design from the inside out. Every thought, every choice, every breath is a brushstroke on the canvas of our lives. I once met a retired firefighter named Thomas who embodied this shift. For most of his life, he ran toward chaos, literal flames, emergencies, the call for help. When he finally retired, he said the silence unnerved him. No one needed me to fix anything anymore, he confessed. I didn't know what to do with the quiet. At first, he filled his days with noise, TV errands, endless small tasks. But over time, he began to take slow morning walks. No headphones, no destination, just footsteps and air. Eventually, he started carrying a notebook, jotting down what he noticed: the smell of wet grass, the sound of birds at dawn, thoughts that rose like clouds. I used to put out fires, he told me once, smiling. Now I light candles. That is the essence of designing a peaceful life, transforming reaction into reflection, urgency into presence. It begins by realizing that peace is not something you stumble upon at the end of struggle. It is something you cultivate in the middle of it. So ask yourself gently, what am I cultivating now? Every day we plant seeds with our thoughts, with our words, with how we spend our time. Some grow into thorns of stress and resentment. Others blossom into compassion and ease. You can't always control what grows, but you can choose what you water. Maybe that means starting your mornings in silence instead of screens. Maybe it's learning to say no without guilt, and yes, only when your heart hums quietly in agreement. Maybe it's setting aside time each week, not for chores, not for performance, but for stillness. Journaling, meditation, watching the sky change color at dusk. It doesn't need to be dramatic. As one Zen master said, if you wish to transform your life, begin by changing how you tie your shoes. Meaning, transformation lives in small, consistent acts of mindfulness. The Buddha taught that suffering arises from tanha, craving, the constant reaching for what isn't here. We think I'll rest when this is done, or I'll be happy when this changes. But peace does not wait at the finish line. It waits right here, hidden beneath your resistance to the present moment. Peace begins the moment you stop fighting what is. That doesn't mean becoming passive. It means living with gentle responsiveness, meeting each moment as it arrives without trying to reshape it into what your mind prefers. A peaceful life is not a perfect one. It's a life designed with awareness, where each decision is guided not by habit, but by harmony. Imagine your life as a garden. Each day you tend to it. Some days you plant. Some days you prune. Some days you simply sit and marvel at the way sunlight touches the leaves. You can't force a flower to bloom faster, but you can remove the weeds that choke it. What are the weeds in your life? Maybe they're the expectations of others. Maybe it's the voice that says you're behind. Maybe it's the constant scrolling, comparing, judging. Let them go one by one. Each weed pulled creates space for peace to grow. And when doubt arises, as it always will, remember that peace isn't something you achieve. It's something you return to, like a home you forgot was yours. The Buddha once said, if you light a lamp for someone, it will also brighten your path. So make peace your lamp. Share it not by preaching it, but by living it. Your calm presence will touch more hearts than your words ever could. When Thomas began volunteering at a local park helping children plant trees, he said, I thought I was teaching them how to grow things. Turns out, they were teaching me how to begin again. That is the secret to peace, the willingness to begin again. Each morning, each breath, each mistake forgiven, each burden set down. You don't have to overhaul your entire life. You just have to meet each moment with care. Choose kindness over control, curiosity over fear, stillness over speed. When you do, peace begins to seep into the ordinary, into the washing of dishes, the folding of laundry, the quiet of evening light. And one day, perhaps without noticing, you'll realize you no longer wake with the same tightness in your chest. The world hasn't changed, but you have. You've stopped trying to master life and started learning to move in rhythm with it. That's the real design, not a blueprint for perfection, but a pattern of presence. So as you move forward, let your life be soft, not sharp, spacious, not crowded. Let it breathe, let it bloom, and when your final days come, may you look back, not on the things you built or the titles you earned, but on the peace you cultivated, the still garden within you that kept growing quietly, no matter the season. Because in the end, a life well lived is not one filled with answers, but one lived in harmony with the mystery. And the most peaceful words you can ever whisper to yourself are simply these: I am already home. There is a certain kind of beauty that only reveals itself in loss, a soft, unspoken grace that blooms when we stop clinging to what was and allow life to be what it is. It doesn't come easily. The mind resists, the heart protests. But somewhere between the ache and the acceptance, a quiet wisdom begins to rise. Letting go is one of the hardest lessons in the human experience. We don't resist change because we are foolish. We resist because we love. We love the familiar, the faces that feel like home, the roles that once gave us meaning. But as the Buddha taught, everything that arises must also pass away. This is not a punishment. It is the law of nature, the rhythm of existence. I once met a woman named Eleanor at a retreat in Chiang Mai. She was in her late 70s and had recently lost her husband of 52 years. For months, she told me she woke up reaching for him in the dark, her hand meeting only the cool weight of the pillow. I kept pretending he was still there, she said. I'd make his coffee, fold his napkin, talk to his photograph. I was terrified that if I stopped, he'd really be gone. One morning during meditation, something shifted. She said she felt her grief like a wave rising, then breaking, then dissolving into something wider than sorrow. It was as if I realized, she whispered, that letting go wasn't losing him. It was freeing him. That realization is the essence of awakening. Letting go doesn't mean we stop loving. It means our love evolves from possession to presence, from holding tightly to holding gently. The Buddha used the image of a closed fist and an open palm. A closed fist holds, controls, demands. An open palm receives and releases. Both can touch, but only the open hand can feel the wind pass through it. As we grow older, life asks us to open our hands again and again to release identities, ambitions, bodies that change, friends who drift away, and even versions of ourselves that no longer exist. It is an unlearning of attachment, a return to flow. But how do we do this without falling into numbness or despair? The answer lies in compassionate surrender. Surrender not as defeat, but as deep trust, the kind that knows the river knows where it's going, even if we can't see around the bend. When we resist the inevitable, we suffer twice, once from the change itself, and once from our refusal to accept it. But when we soften, when we allow grief to move through us, something miraculous happens. Pain becomes prayer. Eleanor told me that after that morning of surrender, she began to speak to her husband differently. Not as someone gone, but as someone transformed. She'd sit by the window whispering to him in the morning light, "You're still here, just everywhere now." That's what letting go can do. It doesn't erase love. It expands it beyond the limits of form. In Buddhism, there's a teaching called anicca, impermanence. It reminds us that everything, no matter how beautiful, is transient. The cherry blossoms fall, the moon wanes, the breath comes and goes. To fight impermanence is to fight life itself, but to embrace it is to enter the deepest peace. And yet, impermanence is not cruel. It is what makes every moment precious. We cherish a flower because we know it will fade. We hold a loved one more tenderly because we know time is short. So how do we practice letting go in daily life? Start small. When something doesn't go as planned, take one conscious breath and whisper, "This too." When someone disagrees with you, loosen your need to be understood. When a memory of the past surfaces, honor it. Then let it drift like a leaf on water. Each small release strengthens the muscle of surrender. Letting go is not a one-time event. It's a rhythm: inhale, exhale, hold, release. And the more we practice, the more we realize that everything we truly love is never lost, only transformed. Even your own body one day will ask to be released. The Buddha's final words were, "All things that arise must also pass away. Strive on with diligence." He wasn't urging despair. He was inviting peace. To live in awareness of impermanence is not to be morbid. It's to live more vividly, more gratefully. When you know that each sunrise is one less than you will ever see, you begin to look longer, breathe deeper, love harder. Letting go also means forgiving, not necessarily forgetting, but releasing the story of how things should have been. You cannot move freely while dragging yesterday's chains. Forgiveness is not about excusing anyone. It's about freeing your own heart from the weight of resentment. There's a story of a monk carrying a heavy sack of stones. When asked why he didn't put it down, he said, "I'm saving them in case I need to throw them again." We laugh, but we all do this, carrying our anger like ammunition against ghosts. Letting go is setting down the sack and realizing the ground beneath your feet was all you ever needed. One evening, as Eleanor and I sat watching the sunset, she said quietly, "I think letting go is the only way to make room for grace." And she was right. Grace can't enter a clenched life. It needs space. It needs a heart willing to be broken open. So if you find yourself in a season of loss, remember, you're not breaking down. You're breaking open. Every release, every goodbye, every surrender makes room for something new. Peace presence, clarity, love unbound by form. The Japanese call it mano no aware, the gentle sadness of things passing. But it's not despair, it's reverence. Reverence for the fleeting beauty of it all. Let go not because life demands it, but because freedom does. And when you do, when your hands finally open and your breath softens, you'll find what you were grasping for was never outside you at all. It was the peace that comes when you stop trying to hold the river and simply let it carry you home. There comes a time when the endless wanting begins to quiet, not because the world has changed, but because you have. The eyes that once searched for more wealth, more validation, more approval, begin to soften. You start noticing the way morning light filters through the curtains, the hum of the kettle, the warmth of a familiar voice. These moments, once overlooked, begin to feel like miracles. Gratitude doesn't arrive as a grand revelation. It slips in quietly, like a friend who's been waiting outside your door, patient through all the noise. And when you finally let it in, it doesn't ask for much. Only that you notice. Only that you say, "Thank you." I once met a man named Victor in a small mindfulness group in Santa Fe. He was 81, tall, gentle, with a face shaped by laughter and loss in equal measure. Each week, when we went around the circle to share something we were grateful for, Victor never spoke of things, not his house, not his health, not his achievements. He'd say things like, "I'm grateful for the sound of rain on the roof," or for the woman at the market who remembered my name. One evening after the group ended, I asked him why his answers were always so simple. He smiled and said, "Because simple is what lasts." His words struck me like a bell in the Dharma. Gratitude is not just a polite emotion, it is a form of awakening. It is the recognition that life, even in its imperfection, is a continuous act of generosity. Each breath is given freely. Each heartbeat is a gift that asks for nothing in return. The Buddha once said, "Let us rise up and be thankful for, if we didn't learn a lot today, at least we learned a little. And if we didn't learn a little, at least we didn't get sick. And if we got sick, at least we didn't die, so let us all be thankful." Gratitude in its purest form is not about denying pain. It's about widening your gaze so that sorrow is no longer the whole story. It's remembering that even in grief there is love. Even in struggle there is growth. Even in loss, there is the miracle of still being here to feel it. We live in a world that thrives on dissatisfaction, advertising comparison, the constant whisper that we are one purchase, one achievement, one compliment away from being complete. But the truth is simpler and infinitely more radical. You already have enough. You already are enough. Enoughness is the forgotten virtue of modern life. To feel enough is not to settle. It is to recognize sufficiency as sacred. When you stop measuring your worth in what's missing, you begin to see abundance everywhere. The Buddha often spoke of santuti contentment. He described it as the wealth of the wise. A person who is content, he said, sleeps peacefully, even on the ground, while the one who chases more, even with riches, never rests. Victor once told me that after his wife passed, he began a small ritual. Each night before bed, he would name 3 things he was grateful for, sometimes profound, sometimes ordinary. At first, he said it felt mechanical, but after a while, it changed the way I saw everything. Gratitude didn't erase my grief. It just made my heart big enough to hold it. That's what gratitude does. It expands the heart until it can hold both joy and sorrow without breaking. You can begin the same way. Before you sleep, ask, what was good today? Maybe it's the scent of coffee, the smile of a stranger, the way sunlight landed on your hands. The mind trained by culture will want to skip over these things, but keep noticing. The small joys are the scaffolding of peace. Over time, gratitude becomes less of a practice and more of a way of seeing. You start to live as if everything were a blessing, not because life becomes easier, but because you become softer, more awake to what's already here. When you feel envy arise, notice it breathe and whisper, "May I be content with what I have. May they be happy with what they have." That small prayer turns comparison into compassion. When you feel the weight of age instead of mourning what's lost, give thanks for what remains, for the breath that still flows the body, that still carries you, the wisdom that time has written quietly into your bones. Even pain can be a teacher worthy of gratitude. It reminds you of your aliveness, of the delicate privilege of feeling at all. And when life feels overwhelming, remember this: gratitude is not the denial of darkness. It is the candle you light inside it. One morning, Victor said something I'll never forget. Every day, he told me, I try to thank the day before. It thanks me. That is the spirit of awakening, to live with such awareness that every act, every meal, every conversation becomes an offering of appreciation. So if you're listening to this now, take a deep breath. Feel it fill your chest. Let it go. That breath, that single effortless act, is proof that you are still being given to. There is nothing you must earn to be worthy of peace. You were born worthy. You were born enough. The path of gratitude is not about accumulating blessings. It's about recognizing them. It's about walking through each day whispering, Thank you, thank you, thank you, until those words stop being sentences and become the rhythm of your being. And when you reach the end of your days, may you look back, not with regret, but with reverence for every sunrise, every kindness, every moment that brought you here. Because in the end, a grateful heart is a peaceful heart, and a peaceful heart is the truest wealth there is. There is a silence deeper than sound, a stillness that doesn't belong to the absence of noise, but to the presence of awareness itself. Many people spend their entire lives running from it. They fill their days with voices, screens, errands, and distractions, terrified of what might surface if the world went quiet. But when the noise finally fades, when the obligations begin to fall away, something sacred begins to stir in that silence. Stillness is not emptiness. It is fullness too vast to be seen by a restless mind. It is the quiet hum of life itself, breathing beneath the chaos, waiting for us to notice. The Buddha often spoke of this stillness as the heart of liberation, not the kind of stillness that's rigid or forced, but the stillness that comes from deep understanding, from no longer needing to chase what comes and flee what goes. I once spent a week at a monastery in the mountains outside Kyoto. It was early spring, the air heavy with mist and the smell of pine. There, I met an elderly monk named Shoin. He rarely spoke, but when he did, his words landed like rain on dry earth. One morning, as we sat facing a garden thick with moss and stone, he whispered, "The mind is like this pond. When it's disturbed, you see only ripples, but when it's still, you can see the moon." His words stayed with me, because that is what the practice of stillness offers, not escape, but reflection. When the surface of the mind settles, truth reveals itself effortlessly. In our youth, silence can feel uncomfortable, even frightening. We equate busyness with meaning, but as we age, as the outer world grows quieter, the house emptier, the phone less demanding, we are given a gift we once mistook for loneliness, the chance to listen deeply. Stillness is not about withdrawing from life. It is about meeting it fully without defense. It's sitting in your living room with the afternoon light and feeling that nothing needs to be added or changed. It's walking slowly to the mailbox and realizing the walk itself is enough. One of the greatest misunderstandings about meditation is that it's meant to quiet the mind. But the Buddha never said that. He taught that meditation is meant to reveal the mind, to help us see our thoughts, our fears, our desires, as passing clouds in a sky that remains untouched. You don't force stillness. You invite it by letting the noise pass without grasping it. Even now as you listen, try this. Take a slow, gentle breath. Feel it move through you. Notice the sounds around you, a bird, a hum, the distant rhythm of your heartbeat. Don't resist them. Let them be part of the silence. That is stillness awareness so wide that even sound belongs to it. Shoin once told me, "People seek peace by controlling life. But true peace is when you stop controlling and simply listen." He was right. The mind that constantly wants to fix, plan, and improve is a mind afraid of stillness. It's afraid because stillness shows us everything, our sadness, our longing, our mortality. But it also shows us something greater, that beneath all of it, there is a space within us untouched by time or pain. When you touch that space, even for a breath, you understand what the Buddha meant when he said, "Within this very body lies the world's end." He wasn't speaking of death, but of presence, that the end of seeking is found right here in the simplicity of awareness itself. Stillness teaches us patience. the patience to let thoughts unfold without rushing them away, the patience to let others be who they are without needing to fix them, the patience to wait for the heart to heal in its own time. In this stillness, even the mundane becomes luminous. The sound of a teacup placed gently on the table, the sight of light moving across a wall, the rhythm of breath rising and falling, the universe expanding and contracting in miniature. The modern world teaches us to chase excitement. But as you grow older, you begin to see that excitement is fleeting and peace is infinite. The quieter the mind, the wider the world becomes. Stillness doesn't demand that you stop moving. It asks that you stop fleeing. You can be still while cooking, while gardening, while sitting with a friend. Stillness is not where you are, it's how you are. A still heart can sit in traffic and feel no rush. A still mind can listen to sorrow and not drown in it. And perhaps most beautifully, stillness teaches us to listen not just to others, but to life itself. When you stop talking over it, life begins to whisper, "This is enough. You are enough." You begin to see that the world doesn't need more of your doing. It needs more of your being. Shoen used to end each day by bowing to the garden. I asked him once why he did it. He smiled softly and said, "Because the garden keeps teaching me how to grow quietly." That's what stillness does. It grows you quietly from the inside out. It softens what was once hard, clears what was once clouded, heals what was once hidden. So tonight, before you sleep, try this simple ritual. Sit in silence for 1 minute. No goals, no mantras. Just breathe and listen. Let life be enough. Because in the end, peace isn't something we create through effort. It's what remains when all effort falls away. And when the pond of your mind finally settles, you will see it clearly. Not the moon, not the stars, but the reflection of your own awakened self, luminous and still. There is a turning point on the spiritual path, not a moment of triumph, but one of quiet surrender, when we stop asking life to be different and begin to meet it exactly as it is. That is the beginning of acceptance, not the kind that feels passive or resigned, but the kind that opens the heart wide enough to hold both joy and pain without collapsing beneath either. Acceptance is often misunderstood. People think it means giving up or settling for less. But true acceptance isn't about saying, "This is fine." It's about saying, "This is here." It's the courage to see reality clearly, not through the fog of resistance, not through the filter of how we wish it to be, but through the simple light of awareness. The Buddha taught that suffering begins where resistance begins. Pain is part of life, but suffering is what we add to it when we refuse to let things be. When we tell ourselves, "This shouldn't have happened. I shouldn't feel this way." It's too late. The mind begins to fight with what already is, and in that struggle, peace disappears. I once met a man named Harold at a mindfulness retreat in Colorado. He was 79 tall, with a posture that carried both strength and sadness. During one evening circle, he shared that he had spent years angry at his body for aging, for the tremors in his hands, for the fatigue that came too soon, for the independence that slowly slipped away. "I kept demanding my body to be like it was at 50, he said quietly. "But one day, I realized it was like yelling at a sunset for not being noon." Everyone fell silent, because we all knew what he meant that moment when you realize the fight itself is what hurts. Harold said that when he began to thank his body, instead of scolding it, something in him shifted. Now, he said, "When my hands shake, I see it as life still moving through me." That is the alchemy of acceptance. It turns resistance into reverence. In Buddhist psychology, acceptance is called kshanti, patience, endurance, the ability to remain open and unshaken amidst the changing winds of life. The Dhammapada says, patience is the highest austerity. Why? Because it takes immense strength to meet reality without flinching. Acceptance doesn't mean liking what's happening. It means allowing it to exist without adding more suffering to it. When grief arises, let it rise. When frustration appears, feel it fully without the extra layer of shame. The emotion itself is temporary. It's the story we tell about it. This means I'm failing or I shouldn't feel this that chains us to it. The practice of acceptance begins small. When you wake and notice your first thought is irritation, don't judge it. Just notice, irritation is here. When you feel lonely, say gently, loneliness is here. You are not the irritation. You are not the loneliness. You are the awareness that holds them both. As one Zen teacher said, the problem is not that you have a problem. The problem is that you think you shouldn't have one. Life by its nature will always be imperfect. The weather will change. People will come and go. The body will age. But when you stop demanding permanence from the impermanent, you start to experience freedom, the kind of peace that doesn't depend on conditions. There is a story of a monk who once sat meditating beside a raging waterfall. When asked why he chose such a noisy place, he smiled and said, "Because when I can find silence here, I can find it anywhere." Acceptance is like that, the ability to find peace not after the storm, but within it. When your mind says, "This shouldn't be happening," pause, take a breath, whisper, "But it is." That simple sentence is a doorway to liberation, because once you stop resisting, what is your energy is no longer tangled in denial. You can finally respond with wisdom. Acceptance also means forgiving yourself for being human, for the mistakes, the regrets, the forgotten words. You can't change what you didn't know then. You can only meet who you are now with tenderness. Harold told me that every night before bed, he places a hand on his chest and says, "This is the body that carried me through another day. Thank you." It's not a ritual of perfection. It's a ritual of peace. There's a teaching in the Satipatthana Sutta that says, "The wise person observes the arising and passing away of all things and remains unmoved." That doesn't mean emotionless. It means anchored like a mountain that allows the clouds to pass without losing its shape. In time, acceptance transforms into something even deeper trust. You begin to trust the unfolding of life, even when it doesn't follow your plans. You start to see that every event, the joyful and the painful, has been part of your awakening. You understand that life was never meant to go your way. It was meant to go the way that teaches you to love, to let go, to awaken. And one day, perhaps, after many years, you'll find yourself sitting quietly, watching the light shift across the floor, and realize there's nothing left to fix, nothing left to prove. Just this breath, this heartbeat, this vast stillness inside. That is acceptance. Not a choice you make once, but a way of being you practice every moment. The poet Rumi wrote, "This being human is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival. Welcome and entertain them all. May you too open the door of your heart, not only to joy and laughter, but to grief, to tiredness, to uncertainty. Let them all be guests in your house, knowing none will stay forever." Because when you stop closing the door on what is difficult, you realize the house itself, your awareness, was always vast enough to hold it all. And in that vastness, peace at last begins to breathe. There is a heaviness that no age escapes the weight of what was said and unsaid, done and undone. We carry it in our chests like stones tucked quietly beneath the ribs. For some, the stones are small, a few careless words, a friendship that faded. For others, they are boulders, betrayals, losses, moments that split the heart in two. Forgiveness is how we begin to set those stones down. But make no mistake, forgiveness is not a simple act. It is a practice, a journey, a slow untying of knots that have been tightening for years. The Buddha once said, "Holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned." When we refuse to forgive, we think we are protecting ourselves. But in truth, we are building a prison and locking ourselves inside. The mind replays old wounds again and again, as if repetition could somehow change the past. Yet every replay deepens the scar. To forgive does not mean to forget or to excuse harm. It means to free yourself from the poison of resentment. It is the decision to stop drinking bitterness and calling it justice. I once met a man named Joseph in his early 80s. He had been a soldier in his youth, and he carried memories that haunted him for decades, choices made in fear faces he couldn't forget. For years, he told me, I thought forgiving myself meant pretending I hadn't done anything wrong. But it doesn't. It means remembering and letting compassion speak louder than shame. He paused, eyes wet, and said, "You can't rewrite the story, but you can change the way you tell it." That, I realized, is the heart of forgiveness. It transforms memory into medicine. There are two directions of forgiveness, outward and inward. Outward forgiveness is for those who have hurt us. It begins not with condoning, but with understanding. To forgive another, we must first see their suffering. Every act of cruelty, every harsh word is born from ignorance, the same ignorance we ourselves fall into when we forget who we are. The Buddha taught that hatred never ceases by hatred, but only by love. Not sentimental love, but love as understanding, as clarity. When you look deeply enough at anyone's pain, you begin to see the shared wound beneath it, the human struggle to be free from fear. One day, you realize forgiveness isn't about the other person anymore. It's about reclaiming your own peace. Inward forgiveness is for ourselves, and for many, it is the harder of the two. The voice inside that says, "I should have known better. I ruined everything. It's too late." That voice can echo louder than any outside judgment. But self-forgiveness doesn't come from denying the past. It comes from holding the past in the light of awareness and saying, "Yes, I did that. I was lost. I was scared. And now I choose to begin again." This is the teaching of Karuna compassion directed inward. I once guided a meditation on forgiveness at a retreat in California. At the end, an older woman approached me, trembling. "I don't think I can forgive myself," she said. "I abandoned my sister when she was sick. I couldn't handle it. And then she died." We sat in silence. After a while, I asked her softly, "If it were your sister speaking to you right now, what would she say?" Her lips quivered. She'd tell me to stop punishing myself. Then I said, "Perhaps forgiveness has already begun." Because forgiveness doesn't start with peace. It starts with honesty. It begins when you stop hiding from your own heart. In Buddhist practice, there's a meditation for forgiveness. You can try it now. Sit quietly. Place a hand over your chest. Breathe deeply. And repeat silently, "If I have hurt anyone knowingly or unknowingly, through my thoughts, words, or actions, I ask for forgiveness. If anyone has hurt me knowingly or unknowingly, Through their thoughts, words, or actions, I offer forgiveness. And if I have hurt myself knowingly or unknowingly through judgment or neglect, I forgive myself. Don't rush it. The words may feel hollow at first, but forgiveness, like a river, doesn't rush either. It flows, carving its way gently through even the hardest stone. Sometimes we resist forgiving because we think it means we must reconcile. But reconciliation and forgiveness are not the same. You can forgive someone and still choose distance. Forgiveness happens inside. Reconciliation happens between. There is also forgiveness for life itself, for the unfairness, the randomness, the unanswered prayers. We carry quiet anger at the universe for what it took or never gave. But when you can look at the whole arc of your story, the heartbreaks and healings, the losses and the love, you begin to see the strange intelligence behind it all. The way even pain has shaped your heart into something wiser, more tender. Joseph told me years after his confession, I still remember everything, but it doesn't hurt the same. It's like the wound turned into a window. That's what forgiveness does. It lets the light back in. So if there's someone you're still holding in anger, or if that someone is, you consider this every breath is an invitation to begin again. The past is a closed door. You don't have to live there. Step gently into the present, carrying only what is useful understanding, compassion, wisdom, and leave the rest like fallen leaves on the forest floor. Because forgiveness is not a favor you do for the past. It's the freedom you grant to the present. And as you release what no longer needs to be carried, you'll feel it, the lightness of being that comes not from forgetting, but from finally remembering who you truly are. Not the wound, not the story, but the vast sky in which it all unfolds. And in that sky, forgiveness is the wind, invisible, endless, and always moving toward peace. There is a quiet art to living well, and it is not the art of holding on, it is the art of letting go. We spend much of our lives clinging to people, to moments, to identities, to stories of who we think we are. We clutch tightly to what once made us feel safe, hoping that if we never release it, we'll never have to face the ache of loss. But the truth is, everything we cling to eventually slips through our fingers, not because life is cruel, but because it is honest. The Buddha taught that all things are impermanent anicca. Every form, every sound, every feeling, every relationship, everything that begins will also end. And rather than this being a reason for despair, it can be our greatest liberation. Because once we stop demanding permanence from what is temporary, we begin to taste peace. I once met an elderly woman named May at a monastery in Taiwan. She was 86 and had lost her husband, 2 sons, and many friends to time. She walked slowly always, with a soft half-smile. One afternoon, I asked her how she managed to remain so calm amidst so much loss. She smiled wider and said, "When I was young, I tried to keep everything close, love youth, even my hair." She laughed softly, touching her bald head. "But now I understand everything that leaves me is teaching me how to return home." "Home?" I asked. She nodded. "To myself." Letting go is not rejection. It's not pushing life away. It's the gentle act of unclenching, of allowing things to be free, including yourself. In Buddhism, there's a story of a monk who came to the Buddha distressed. He said, "I keep meditating, but thoughts keep coming. I can't stop them." The Buddha smiled and replied, "Trying to stop thoughts is like trying to smooth the surface of water with your hand. Let go and it will smooth itself." That's what letting go really means, allowing life to move through you without trying to control its every ripple. Sometimes we hold on not to what we love, but to what hurts us. Anger, guilt, regret. because even pain can feel safer than the unknown. But when we refuse to let go of suffering, we carry it like a burning torch, believing it lights our way, when in truth, it only burns our hands. You can practice letting go in the smallest moments. When someone interrupts you, let go of the need to be right. When plans change, let go of your resistance. When a memory arises, let it float by without chasing it. Each act of release, no matter how small, strengthens the muscle of freedom. Try this simple reflection. Close your eyes and imagine standing by a river. In your hands, you hold a stone for everything you're still clinging to: a person, a memory, a fear. Feel the weight of those stones. Then one by one, imagine placing them gently into the water. Watch them sink, disappearing beneath the surface. Notice how your hands feel afterward: lighter, open, empty. But that emptiness is not loss. It's space. Space for something new to arrive. The heart, too, needs that space. When we cling, we close our hands. When we let go, we open them. And only open hands can receive. The Buddha once compared attachment to holding a lute. If the strings are too tight, it cannot play. If they're too loose, it cannot sing. Letting go doesn't mean cutting the strings of life. It means loosening them enough so the music can flow again. Sometimes the hardest part of letting go is not what we lose, but who we become afterward. The emptiness that follows the question of, who am I without this? But that emptiness is not something to fear. It is the doorway to transformation. You see, when the old self dissolves, the achiever, the parent, the caregiver, the strong one, it can feel like death. But beneath that dissolution lies the birth of something quieter, wiser, freer. The you that is not defined by what you hold, but by how deeply you can love without possession. There's a saying from the Zen tradition: let go or be dragged. When we resist change, we suffer. When we surrender, we flow. A student once asked a Zen master, "What is the path to liberation?" The master held up a teacup and then let it fall from his hand. It shattered on the ground. This, he said, the student didn't understand. The master explained, when you finally let go of everything you thought you needed, you see that what you truly are cannot be broken. That's the paradox. Everything external can fall away, yet something eternal remains untouched. So if there is something you've been carrying, an old argument, a missed opportunity, a version of yourself that no longer fits, maybe this is your moment to release it. You don't have to throw it away in anger. You can set it down gently with gratitude for what it taught you. Letting go is not forgetting. It's remembering without pain. It's whispering thank you to the chapters that shaped you and turning the page. And if you're afraid of what comes next, remember this: the trees lose their leaves every autumn, and not once do they fear that spring won't come. Life, in its infinite wisdom, will fill what you make space for. So breathe deeply. Open your hands. Loosen your heart, because the art of letting go isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of your peace. There is a moment, quiet, unannounced, when the long journey inward begins to feel complete. It doesn't come with music or revelation. It comes in stillness, in the rhythm of your breath, in the way sunlight spills gently across your floor, in the unhurried pulse of an ordinary morning. You realize that all along, you were not walking toward enlightenment. You were walking home. Home is not a place nor a destination. It is the simple recognition of what has always been here, awareness itself, the witness beneath every joy and sorrow, the space that holds your laughter, your tears, your memories, your silence. The Buddha once said, Within this very body, 6 feet in length, lies the world, the origin of the world, and the end of the world. He was pointing to this truth, that what we seek outside is already unfolding inside. The peace you've been chasing was never hiding in the mountains or the temples or the words of a teacher. It was waiting in the pause between your thoughts, in the soft hum beneath your breath, in the gentle gaze of presence that has been watching all your comings and goings without judgment. As the seasons of life shift, as the body softens, as memory fades, as friends return to the earth, something within begins to loosen its grip on form. The outer layers fall away, revealing what cannot be lost. It's not that you become someone new. It's that you finally remember who you've always been. Awareness vast and luminous, untouched by time. I once visited an elderly monk in Chiang Mai, nearly 90, whose eyes were as clear as water. When I asked him what enlightenment felt like, he laughed a sound light as wind chimes. It feels, he said, like nothing special. Just this, but without the worry. Just this. For most of us, that is the hardest truth to grasp, that awakening is not a distant summit, but the simplicity of this very moment. The mind keeps saying, there must be more. But life in its patient wisdom whispers, there is only now. When you stop running toward peace, you start walking in it. Homecoming begins with small recognitions. The sound of your own laughter after years of silence. The taste of tea when you're fully present. The way grief softens when you stop resisting it. Slowly, you realize that everything you once tried to escape was part of the path. The pain, the loss, the confusion. They were not detours. They were teachers. Each one asking, can you stay? Can you love this too? And somewhere along the way, your heart says yes. Yes to impermanence. Yes to uncertainty. Yes to being human. That yes is the sound of awakening. There's an old Zen story about a monk who asked his master, "Where is the path to enlightenment?" The master replied, "Do you hear that brook?" The monk listened. "Yes," he said. There said the master is the entrance. It was never hidden. We were simply too busy listening to our own thoughts to hear it. Returning home means letting life be ordinary again, but seeing the ordinary as sacred. Washing dishes becomes an act of devotion. Folding clothes becomes a meditation. Watching the sunset becomes prayer. The difference is not in the doing, but in the being. The shift from I must to I am. It's strange, isn't it? We spend decades trying to build a life to collect experiences to become someone, and then as wisdom ripens, we start to unbuild, to unlearn, to unbecome. We begin to see that peace was never about adding more, but subtracting what was never ours to hold. The fears, the comparisons, the striving, one by one they fall away like leaves in late autumn. Beneath them all, what remains is astonishingly simple breath, awareness, love. In this stillness, forgiveness comes easily. Gratitude becomes effortless. Even death, once a shadow at the edge of our thoughts, begins to feel like an old friend waiting at the gate, not the end, but a gentle continuation, a deeper rest. One evening, that same monk from Chiang Mai told me, "You know, people always ask what happens after death, but few ask what truly happens before life." He smiled. The answer, he said, is the same. Stillness. You came from stillness. You will return to stillness. Between those two silences, you dance for a while. Don't forget to enjoy the dance. That is the essence of it all. To dance consciously, to live kindly, to let each breath remind you that you belong to the great rhythm of existence. Even the pain has its own music. Even the silence hums with meaning. So now, as you come to the end of this reflection, Take a moment. Feel the air enter and leave your body. Feel the miracle of being alive here now. This is your homecoming, not to a house, not to a title, not even to a belief, but to awareness itself, the home that can never be taken from you. You are not your regrets. You are not your memories. You are not even your name. You are the space in which all of that arises and passes like waves upon the sea. And just as the ocean never mourns the waves that dissolve you, two can live without clinging to what comes and goes. This is freedom, not the absence of pain, but the end of resistance. Not a place to reach, but a way of seeing. In this final quiet, may you rest in the understanding that you have never truly been lost. Every step, every stumble, every season has been leading you here to this stillness, this breath, this now. And if there is one thing to carry from this entire journey, let it be this: you are already enough. You have already arrived. You are home. Take a deep breath. Smile softly. Let go. The river has returned to the sea. You may rest now.